day. How you going? What do you know? We'll strike a light. Good day, and how you going? Just say good day, and you'll be right.
G'day and welcome to Australian English with Jason. I promised in Conjunctions 1 to show you what to do if your teacher asked you for the longest sentence you can write. Now let's make sure we remember that a sentence is an idea or a thought turned into words. But we can include as many details as we like, as long as they are still connected to that idea or that thought. So let's start with the core of the sentence, the heart of the sentence, which is the verb. Everything I do will be taken from a different classic Australian book. Let's start with Tales from the Gum Tree by May Gibbs. Now, these are the gumnut babies. There they are. Their names are Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. They were the first Australian children's book to be popular and to talk about Australian. So I am going to take a random verb from this book. Settle. If your teacher ever asked for the shortest sentence you can, you would write a verb. Almost any verb on its own is sort of a sentence. But this idea should say the person or the thing that does the verb, the subject. Look for Anything by Jim Haynes. He collects these stories and poems from all over Australia, and they are the most wonderful books for learning about how Australians think, how we live, what we do. Rabbit. A rabbit settles. Notice how I added a, because it could be any rabbit. If we knew the one we've all been talking about or the one we all know, it would be the rabbit. And because rabbit is not I, it's not you, we have to put an S on the end of the verb. So that's who does the verb, and it goes in front. The receiver of the action is called the object. The receiver goes after the verb. For the term of his natural life is one of the great historical Australian novels. So now we are going to take an object out of this book. A convict. That's usually the basic pattern for a sentence. So who does the action? What is the action? Who receives the action? Subject, verb, object. Let's now introduce some more elements. When did this happen? And if we bring in when, we're probably going to need to change something else in the sentence. What might that be? A Fortunate Life by Albert Facey is a wonderful story of a true life of a man who never thought he was anything special, but he did so many amazing things in his life. And a random time at 5 o'clock. That doesn't really tell us whether it's future or past. Let's say it was at 5 o'clock yesterday. So now we have at 5 o'clock yesterday, comma, a rabbit settled a convict. So now let's see if we can find out where this happened. You won't believe how much you can learn about places and animals and food in Australia by reading this one little children's book, Possum Magic by Mem Fox. The illustrations are excellent and it's going to be a very good place for finding places. Whenever we have a place and a time together, the place goes first. And the place is Perth. In Perth at 5 o'clock yesterday, a rabbit settled a convict. So let's think about whether there was just some extra dimension to it. What if there was not just the convict, but somehow the result of the action is passed on? That's what we call indirect objects. Mob is a very informal, perhaps a little bit rude way of talking about a big group of people. They're a weird mob is a classic story about a man who came to Australia from Italy. We are looking for an indirect object, crowd. But we need a word to link to the crowd. It's called the preposition. I have a second Jim Haynes book. A yarn means an amazing story, but a true story. Of. So maybe this is a crowd of convicts. The action is indirectly related to the crowd because of the convicts' involvement in that crowd. Now we can add more details. What type of rabbit? What type of convict? What type of crowd? I can jump puddles. Alan Marshall wrote a lot of stories about ordinary Australians. This is the story of his own youth. When he was a child, he had a disease called polio, and it made him a cripple. He couldn't use his legs. He couldn't walk or his whole life. So let's use this to find 3 adjectives. Eager, deep, deep. When we use deep for a person, it means they think a lot. Deep. Huge. In Perth at 5 o'clock yesterday, an eager rabbit settled a deep convict of the huge crowd. Because I added those 3 adjectives, I had to change one other thing in the sentence. Because eager starts with a vowel, I had to change a to an. If I wanted to, I could add 2 or 3 indirect objects and prepositions. I could have a preposition that says where it happened, or what the rabbit used, how it happened. Should we do that? Back to our preposition book. With, and back to our indirect object book. Soccer. And we can say under. Hotel. Under the hotel is the place, so it goes in front of with soccer. The place always goes first. Now let's talk about how this was settled. We know what the rabbit used to settle, but how? That would be an adverb. The Great Race by David Hill is the race between the English, the French, and the Dutch to make a map of the whole of Australia. So let's now take this book and find an adverb. Now the adverb could go in a couple of places. Watch an advert with adverbs for more information, but it could go at the start of the sentence, followed by a comma, or it could go straight after the verb. Now in an advert with adverbs, I said that the best place for the adverb was just before the direct object. But the adverb's job is really to add to the verb. So it just makes sense to shift it closer to the verb, because we have quite a few words between the verb and where the adverb is technically supposed to go. So we can shift it. Let's find an adverb. Regularly. Well, I don't think we can use regularly in this sentence. Regularly means something that keeps on happening. But we've only said one time, one place. So we probably need to choose again. We could say in Perth at 5 o'clock every day. We would need to change that to the simple present, the verb. But let's see if we can find a different adverb. Nearly. Nearly. In Perth at 5 o'clock yesterday, an eager rabbit nearly settled the deep convict of the huge crowd under the hotel with soccer. Should we try for a sentence adverb? Obviously. I don't know what part of that sentence is obvious, but obviously will do. So our sentence is getting longer, but there is one easy way we can almost double the length of the sentence. A conjunction. But if it's still part of the same idea, there would probably, doesn't have to be, but I would say probably be part of it which is the same. Digger, the dog who went to war. A beautiful little children's book that's a true story of a man who wanted to take his dog with him to the First World War. Digger is an Australian word for a soldier. Now, I can take a conjunction from here. Let me find one. Conjunction of time, after. I don't think we need to go through each of those books again, but I do want to make sure that we understand how the pattern works. Place and time first, and place in front of time, comma, because they are separate from the rest of the idea. They are only setting the scene, if you like, for the idea. The main point of the idea is subject, verb, and what we're calling now direct object. So who or what does the action, what is the action, and who or what had the action done. We repeated preposition indirect object 3 times. saying more about the direct object, then where the action happened, then how the action happened. Adjectives for any noun. Verbs can be followed by adverbs and then a conjunction. And that can mean the whole thing starts again. I'd like to see in the comments the longest sentence you can. Try your best to follow the pattern. See how much you can put into one sentence as long as it's all one idea. Look forward to reading them. I'll correct anything if it needs correcting. And I'll see you again soon. Hooroo!